Quilters 911. I'm Tony Reynolds, your 911 quilter, and I am here to answer your questions. As a Studio 180 Design certified instructor, I'm frequently asked questions about various patterns, techniques, units, and blocks. And this week I got a question from VeRonica in Illinois about this quilt called Fantasy. In particular, she wanted to know how to make a combination unit which looks like this. It's basically a half square triangle that's been squared again so that you have this one large triangle on one side and these two smaller triangles on the other side. It's fairly simple to make, so I thought I'd show you a quick demonstration. So let's get started. Okay, to make a combination unit, you're going to need to have 3 different fabrics. Here I have a nice shade of green and 2 purple shades that I'm going to use in my combination unit. You'll need a rotary cutter for cutting your fabric and trimming them down. Some sort of marking device. I have my Quilter's magic wand, a marking pencil, a ruler for trimming, and I also have the fantasy pattern that drove VeRonica's question. We're going to use that to talk about how to determine what size you need to cut your fabrics down to make your combination unit. Okay, and looking at this fantasy pattern, the combination unit actually shows up pretty quickly. So I'm going to go here to page 2, and on page 2 you can see the combinations start to show up here. And looking at the pattern, there are various different color combinations that you'll need to make. It also shows you how to square them up. Now the pattern calls for cutting these squares at 3 1/4 inches, but I like to slightly oversize everything, and that's actually the Studio 180 way, so that these can be precision trimmed down to the precise right size. Then those are going to be put together to make this flying goose type unit where you have a large goose in the center, and then your sky is actually a combination of these 2 triangles on each side and the various different colors. So make sure you read your color placement very carefully so that your large triangles are the right size and that you have your sky, the 2 different triangles according to the pattern. A good thing is that these are mirror images. That is the technique I'm going to be showing you today. And like I said, it is very simple, so let's dive right in. So before we get started, let's look at our Tucker trimmer instructions and let's compare it to the pattern. We know the pattern said we needed to cut 3 1/4 inch squares. But if I look at the finish size units that we're going for, it's actually a 2-inch finish, a 2 1/2 inch unfinished, which we see here on our instructions. If we go down and look, there are instructions for half square triangles, the combination unit, and also quarter square triangles. Since we're going to do a combination unit, if we go under the 2-inch finish, it actually tells us to cut our squares 3 1/2 inches, which is a 1/4 inch bigger than what the pattern calls for. The reason for that is that this will give us a little extra fabric so we can trim down these blocks to a precision size, which will make for better piecing in our quilt. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to be making 5-inch finished squares, or an unfinished of 5 1/2. So if I go down to the combination units, it's going to tell me I need 6 1/2 inch squares. And that's actually what I've already cut. So here I have my 3 different fabrics cut at 6 1/2 inches each. I have my greens and my 2 purples. It's really important to figure out which fabric is going to be your large triangle first. My large triangle is going to be the green, so I'm going to save that for last, and I'm just going to set it aside. And I'm going to start with my 2 purple fabrics. I'm going to choose the darker fabric that I'm going to mark the back side on before sewing. I'm going to set aside my lighter purple fabrics. So if I take and flip one of these over, I'm just going to lay it on point because we're going to mark this on point. I'm going to take my Quilter's magic wand, and we're just going to lay it so that the light green stripe going down the center lays right in the corner of each one of these sides. I'm going to take my pencil kind of at an angle, go right in to the side of that and mark. And then I'm going to repeat on the other side, keeping the Quilter's magic wand held down. You can do this rather lightly. You just need to be able to see it. I'm going to do it a little bit darker here so that you can see it on camera. So now when I move my Quilter's magic wand, you can see I have a line on each side of the corners, and that is exactly 1/4 inch from the center of the corner. And what we're going to do now is take this piece and lay it right sides together with the other purple fabric. And then we're going to take it to our sewing machine and stitch down each line just on the inside of each one of these lines. I've already marked my other purple fabric, so I'm going to take both of these to the sewing machine, stitch these down, and I will be right back. Okay, I've now stitched down both lines, and I've used a blue thread so that you can see the thread on here. Typically I would use white, but this is just so you can see, and you can see the line and how I have stitched just on the inside of both lines. So at this point we are just going to take a ruler, we're going to place it so that it goes right through those two corners again, and cut right down the center of both of those lines using a rotary cutter. And I've got a little thread there. And when we open this up, we're going to have 2 half square triangles. Okay, so now that we have our 2 half square triangles, I'm going to lay them with the dark purple side up because I'm going to be pressing to that side. And the first thing I want to do is to set my seam. So now that my iron has heated up, I'm just going to take it across that seam. I'm going to get it set on both of these. And then I'm just going to fold this back and gently press. And that's going to take that seam and fold it towards the dark. And then we'll repeat on this other piece. Again, setting that seam first, getting it ready to press back, and then we're going to press it towards the dark. I always recommend setting your seam first, getting it good and hot and ready for you to press in the direction you want to go. So now that our half square triangles are ready, I'm going to take one of our green squares and place it so it is wrong side up, and then lay the Quilter's magic wand, same way we did before, so that it's going through the corners on point on both sides. And then I'm going to take a pencil and mark both sides. Again, you can do this just enough so you can see it for sewing. I'm going to make it a little bit dark here so that you can see it on camera. And this fabric's a little bit darker, so you may not see it well, but it's the same concept as earlier before. So I now have that marked on both sides, and I've already done this fabric earlier, so we are ready to go. So what you're going to do is take these 2 green fabrics, which are going to become your larger triangles. I'm going to take one of the half square triangles we made earlier, and then I'm going to take my green fabric so that the 2 lines go across or intersect with the seam on my other half square triangle. Now this one will be slightly larger. You just want to center it on there, right sides together as best you can. And again, so that those lines are crossing over your seam. And I'm going to do that with both of these. So now we're ready to trim between the 2 lines. I'm just going to take my ruler. I'm going to place it from corner to corner in between the 2 stitch lines. And I'm going to trim. And now let's look at the results. When I fold this back, I have my 2 small triangles and my larger triangle. And I actually trimmed the other one earlier. You'll notice up until this point, outside of cutting my 6.5 inch squares, I haven't trimmed anything, but we're at that point. But let's press these out first and get them ready for a precision trim down. So I have my wool pressing mat here, and this time I'm going to be pressing towards the green, so I have them green sides up. I am going to set my seam and gently press it back. To get the block nice and flat. Okay, before we trim down our blocks, let's take a look at our tucker trimmer and understand its design a little bit. So first of all, there is a whole circle on one side and a half circle on the other. The whole circle represents your whole sizes, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the half represents your half sizes, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, so on and so forth. Each of the sizes are represented by two black lines that will make your precision square. And the half sizes also have the same outline to represent your precision square, but they're dotted. There's also a common diagonal that runs from corner to corner. And then intersecting with that common diagonal, there is a dotted diagonal line that will cross over the common diagonal. And that there is one of these for each of the sizes. That makes centering up intersecting seams on your blocks super easy. So to trim down our combination units, which I said before, we're going to make 5.5 unfinished, 5-inch finished squares. We're going to use the 5.5-inch trim down lines on our ruler, and to get our seams perfectly centered, we're going to use the common diagonal with the diagonal intersecting through the 5.5-inch square. So let's see this play out. I'm going to take one of my combination units, place it on my mat. I'm going to take the common diagonal and line it up with this seam and the intersecting diagonal for 5.5-inch square across the seam for the green triangle. There's our 5.5-inch square. I'm going to place the common diagonal line right here, and then I am going to line up the seam for the green triangle with the intersecting line for the 5.5-inch square. So let's take this now. Hopefully you can see that on there. We're going to trim up. Oh, the other thing I'll point out is at this point the fabric is slightly overlapping the precision trim down for 5.5-inch square, but that's okay because we're going to rotate and trim and get this perfectly trimmed down. So I'm going to go up, and then I'm going to go in about 1 inch. I'm going to do that to save my corners. I'm going to back up and then go forward. I'll just take away that fabric. So now this side is precision trimmed. The Studio 180 design gets its name because everything's always rotated, or something's always rotated 180 degrees. So now that I've rotated this and it's time to trim down the purple triangles, I am going to place the 5.5-inch precision trim down lines right on my green triangle. They're no longer going to be overlapping. And when I do that, since I've already precision trimmed this down, you're going to see that the intersecting diagonal for the 5.5 square is going to be lined up right on that green triangle seam line. And the common diagonal is going to be between the two purple triangle seam lines. And I'm going to have a little bit of the purple fabric ready for the final precision trim down. So we're going to cut up, go in about 1 inch, back up, and go across. Again, that's to save the corners so that we don't nick them. And after that, I'm going to have a perfectly precision trimmed down combination unit. And I really didn't have to think about how do I line up the ruler to get this seam right in the center. And we'll repeat that again, and you'll see how quick and easy this is. Barely even have to think about it. Again, my 5.5-inch square. Got this lined up with the purple seam and this one lined up with the green. I'm going to hold down my ruler. I'm going to cut up, go across the top, rotate 180 degrees, and repeat on the other side. Trimming up and going across the top. So I now have my mirrored units trimmed down, and the other two blocks I've trimmed down as well. And there's a lot you can do with these. The pattern specifically calls for that you bring your larger triangles together to make your goose like this. So you would have them like this, and then these two triangles would match and these two triangles would match, and this ultimately goes into your woven border pattern. But there's a lot you could do with these. You could take and stack them like this, and you could create like a repeating pattern. So I could bring this triangle here, this one here, and you could just repeat those alternating colors and make a long straight line and maybe intersect some squares here. You could create some sort of a design like this. You might even do a design something like this. So that's more of like a pinwheel type look with your purples. You could even make a pinwheel with your greens. So we'd have something like that. So there's just a number of different designs that you could come up with these. I think really the sky's the limit. Your imagination is your limit. So I'd love to see what kind of designs you come up with. So please feel free to share. Somebody might learn something from you. I might learn something from you, and we might learn something from each other. Just a lot of fun. So hope you get a chance to play around with this and love to see what you might make. So now that you see how easy it is to make a combination unit, I hope you'll give it a try, and please share your results with us. And if there's something you need help with, send me a message or leave a comment. You never know, it may be featured in an upcoming episode of Quilter's 911. And if you'd like to see more from Quilter's 911, remember, hit that subscribe button, and I hope to see you soon.